Hi, my name is Eleni Bonilla.
Hi guys, my name is Erica Cruz.
My name is Denise Garcia.
Hi, my name is Irais Gonzalez.
And hello, I am Jamie Taniguchi, and this is our literature presentation on mental health outcomes of poverty. So I wanted to start off with a blog that gives a firsthand experience with a woman who is now a mother and how her childhood poverty affects her today. So I started off with a quote from her saying that my childhood impacts me every day in ways researchers may struggle to comprehend. So for Dilvinyasa, which is her name, childhood poverty now means becoming really obsessed with money as an adult. She continues asking herself every day, have you made enough today? Are you sure you have enough savings? Shouldn't you get up and do a little more work? It also means having to say no to playtime with her kids due to do more work due to a fear of not making enough money, feeling panicked at every ATM because she convinces herself that the money will magically disappear one day and she'll be in debt. It also means trying not to overreact to her middle class children's disregard for the value of money, and also praising herself every time she takes her family out to eat before slightly regretting spending so much money in case something were to happen. Uh, the blog that Dovin wrote, on the flip side, she acknowledges that with her experience of childhood poverty, she understands that circumstances people are born into are never the sum of who they are or what they're worth. And so this experience really helps with her work as a journalist as she interviews people from all sorts of walks of life and helps her not judge people's circumstances that they are born into. So the second article I chose is titled Persistence on Challenging Tasks Mediates the Relationship Between Childhood Poverty and Mental Health Problems. So this article examines the role of task persistence in poverty and mental health. So Howe et al. States that poor children are more likely to give up on challenging tasks than their privileged peers. So this article tested whether poverty-related deficits and persistence contribute to the well-documented link between childhood disadvantage and mental health. So for the study, they analyzed children ages 9, 13, and 17 on their persistence on challenging tasks, as well as their mental health. And for the study, childhood poverty is the time participants lived in poverty from birth to 9 years old. And the results of the study showed that lower task persistence is associated with the worsening mental health association, as well as task persistence declines through their adolescence, which explains the relationship between childhood poverty and the greater likelihood in mental health issues through adolescence.
So the first article that I chose for this presentation is titled The Cumulative Effects of Poverty on Children's Social Emotional Development, and it looked at both absolute and relative poverty. So the article first started talking about the two different definitions of poverty that were used in the study. The first one was absolute poverty, which was defined as a federal poverty threshold, and it was stated that it is lower than relative poverty. The second one is relative poverty and is defined as any income that is less than 50% of the median household. And this is by Lee and Zhang in 2021. And there were two main questions in the article. The first one was, does cumulative poverty measured in absolute and relative terms have an impact on a child's social emotional outcome and development? And then the second was, does this association increase or decrease as a child grows older and transitions into adolescence and adulthood? The study actually found that relative poverty had a bigger impact on a child's social emotional outcome, and it only increased as a child got older, meaning that over time it did not decrease and it did not get better. The effects of it got worse. Another thing that affected a child's social emotional development was the child and the maternal characteristics. And the article also stated that 1 in 5 children in the US in poverty have an elevated risk for social emotional difficulty. So 1 in every 5 child um, who are in poverty have a higher risk of having their social emotional development affected because they live in poverty. Lee and Zhang also stated that disadvantaged children are more likely to experience both physical and psychological stressors, um, as well as it can alter their genes as their physiological response system. And then Evans and Kim, as cited in Lee and Zhang, stated that children cannot effectively change their self-regulatory coping mechanism because of the stressors and other hardships they face as they're growing up in their social emotional development. Lastly, Lee and Zhang stated that children living in poor households are 3 times more likely to develop a mental illness than children who do not live in poverty or low income. The second resource I used was the effects of poverty on children. It was not dated and it was a website by Compassion International. It didn't have a stated author, but there they stated that mental health in poverty is something that we really need to focus on and pay more attention to because the consequences of not addressing the mental health of children, especially those living in poverty, can shorten their life expectancy. Mental health conditions account for actually 60% of the global burden of disease and injury in children between 10 to 19 years old. The behavior disorder in children are actually the second leading cause of burden in children 10 to 12. And they actually also stated that 90% of adolescents um, live in poverty. And of those 90% of those who commit suicide due to mental health problems um, are adolescents living in poverty.
How does poverty affect teenage mental health? The impact that poverty has among young children and teens is significant and long-lasting. Teens that have been in poverty line as children have been highly affected, and most negative outcomes start to show when they are in high school as young adults. Youth in a poor family gain more responsibilities with increased demands of maturity. This becomes a toll on their mental health because they are still teenagers, not able to have the most opportunities like other young adults. Research suggests that poverty may have direct effects on adolescents' mental health. Poverty can also impact quality of life and social adjustments. It can have a strong direct effect on adolescents' mood changes, in addition to the indirect effect through negative changes in the parent-adolescent relationship. One example is that the adolescent girls were being diagnosed with depression and adolescent boys were drinking to the point of intoxication. Without giving the extra help for students that go through it, it can create a higher rate of dropouts, substance abuse, self-harm, and early death. Teens that have grown in poverty feel helpless, and same as well as high poverty neighborhoods in teens. It has been associated with increased depressive symptoms, anxiety, and externalized problem behaviors. These co-occurring mental health problems among teens start to have a result on them and can affect them in the long run. Their self-decision making can be impacted to where they see that nothing might change, so they make long-term decisions that can lead to the cycle of poverty. Teens already have so much going on in their lives with schools, and having the ability to balance life at home and being a student can be hard. Especially coming from a low-income household, they don't have everything they would want that others in school may have. As teenagers, it creates a feeling of solitude that may push them into making poor choices, as stated before. They feel like outcasts, as may no one understand them. How does poverty affect the mental health among parents? Parents are the most affected when dealing with poverty because they have to find a balance with the relationship of their children while they are going through their own mental health issues. Poverty causes parental distress, the relationship between parents and children is disrupted, a decrease of discipline, and a decrease of monitoring their children. When children feel neglected by their parents, it begins to split them apart. When this lack of parenting starts to happen, this can be when the parents start to feel overwhelmed and depressed. The kids begin to give up on their academic, and it ties back into how children are also affected with the poverty. This social barrier that is put up by the parents' stress and mental health is what begins to pull the relationship down for their kids. For example, when parents get a test result back from schools, per se, and they see that their child isn't doing so well, they may lash out on them, but don't see the bigger issue or ask themselves why the child may be acting a certain way. When the children don't feel like they are being monitored or cared for, that sense of caring fades away, so they don't put in effort towards their own future. Poverty has cumulative effects that relate to parental unemployment, underdeployment, and unstable work conditions, which rather than poverty, lead to parent adolescent conflict, unsupportive parenting, and harsh disciplinary practices. When parents do have a job, it can be difficult to find the balance of being involved with their children's lives. It isn't that parents don't want to be involved, but that they want to provide the necessities for their kids. It may be difficult for them to manage. They could have just enough, but not more than enough, where they can spend on luxuries or things that their child may want. Families face pressures and put at risk their mental health to protect their loved ones. Poverty has negative effects on parents. It creates detrimental stress upon them, adding on to taking care of their children and making sure they have everything they need. Families even may be victimized and seen as a failure when they may not be able to provide for more than they can.
I decided to take a different route and use some websites that were based on poverty and education. So for children that have mental health disorders due to the circumstances in their personal life, suffer from depression, ADHD, anxiety, and etc. Those children who live amongst or within poverty, their daily life circumstances can be extremely harmful to them and potentially leading to suicide, jeopardizing their success, their educational success, and the possibility of ever trying to escape poverty in their adult years. In most recent years, due to COVID, the CDC conducted a report in 2018 that discussed how children that live below the 100% poverty line developed a type of developmental, mental, and behavioral disorder, and that's more than 1 in 5 children who are more likely to encounter it. Children that are in poverty who deal with stress demonstrate issues with not being able to detain concentration, being able to comprehend or understand new information, knowledge, and staying motivated. It results in them falling behind in school and struggle alone with little to no help. Referring back to the American Public Health Association, it is to be reported that more than 50% of school absences are due to children having chronic stress. It eventually causes them to not fully succeed in school, but in most cases, and not to finish and graduate from high school either. Children from low-income homes or families are 10 times more likely to drop out of high school than the general population. The second one is another website that I chose, but based on global poverty and education as well. In some countries in the world, school isn't free and easy accessible as it is here. And unfortunately, it leads to the parents' difficult decision to either they can decide to send their children to school or provide basic necessities for them due to school fees. And then eventually just leads to them surrendering their education and most importantly, their future. In the sub-Sahara Africa, having the most poorest children, they aren't able to attend school because of the required fees, and it has led to having the lowest enrollment rates being compared to the 75 global ratio. With children are not attending school, they are being forced to stay at home and do necessary chores, and in most cases being put to work at such a young age to help provide for their families. This eventually leads to having the cycle of poverty repeat itself within generations and becoming a never-ending cycle, being a sad truth. And in some other countries, poverty does in fact prevent girls from being able to attend school due to the stereotype of women not having the right to educate themselves or being more, or it isn't required because they are only meant for housework and being housewives.
And I chose an article of global mental health and poverty. The overview is global mental health has increased due to stress, violence, trauma, homelessness, education, and malnutrition. Lower and middle income families are the ones that have been affected the most. The 6 countries were China, Thailand, India, Nigeria, Uganda, and Iran. How to improve poverty in countries: financial services, debt management, and cash transfers, and microcredit. In India, microcredit increased a risk of common mental disorders among poor mothers because they didn't know how to navigate. To improve malnutrition in lower and middle class countries, nutritional supplement health will help them and better work opportunities for everyone. Mental health has a negative effect in economic status. Does moving from Another article that I chose was, does moving from a high poverty to a low poverty neighborhood improve mental health? A realistic overview of moving to opportunity. The overview. The Moving to Opportunity program was for families to move into high poverty neighborhoods and to provide better resources, better better work opportunities, school, positive role models, and to improve mental health. What were some moving what were the moving to opportunity outcomes? Studies show that moving into a better neighborhood, women and children felt safer due to no violence, crimes, and a positive mental health outcomes. 15% of mothers in New York City were less likely to have depressive symptoms and anxiety. Who experienced these outcomes? And the moving to opportunity, it impacted women the most. Men and adolescent men or kids had a little to no effect. Males stayed in their neighborhoods. They experienced discrimination in higher poverty neighborhoods. Females, it reduced stress and was safer for themselves and children. The structural barriers, family found it hard to socialize within the neighborhood because of the language barrier and race. They felt isolated and loneliness.
All right. And our discussion question is, what are some habits or aspects of your personality that have possibly stemmed from your childhood?
This is our reference slide, and here we listed all of our references, 8 of them. And yeah, that was it for my part. Thank you for listening.